Hello and welcome back. This is Dawn with another video for Pink Fresh Studio. Now today I have a clean and simple little beauty for you featuring the Sweet Blossoms die and coordinating stencil. Now if you're not one to keep a lot of colored cardstock on hand but still want to add some color to your die cuts, this is going to be a great one for you. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, so this is the Sweet Blossoms die, and you can see here you've got a bunch of different stems and flower heads, and then there is a matching stencil here so that you can color your cardstock and then cut your die from that. Now these stencils are quite large and you could lay it out on a piece of cardstock, stencil, and then lay your dies. However, I don't want to waste any cardstock, so I've just laid my dies out, marked about how much I need, and then I'm going to trim that down. Now this means I'm going to have to shift my stencils when I go to stencil, but that's okay. I'll walk you through what I do. So here I'm going to go ahead and tape my cardstock here to my work surface. If you have a sticky mat or something like that, that would work great as well. And now I'm just going to line up my stem part of my stencils here at the bottom of my cardstock. You can use the little corner grid that they have etched onto the stencil to help you line this up. And that's going to be really important when you get to the flowers because there is 2 layers to this stencil. Actually, there's 3. There's 2 stencils in here and 3 layers for the flowers. So for my stems, I'm just going to color all of mine one color, and I'm using Grassy Knoll here. If you wanted, you could blend in 2 or 3 different colors. You could go for a lighter green and a darker green, or maybe a yellow and a green, or blue and a green, whatever you want to do. For simplicity's sakes, I'm using a large blending brush and just going over all of these with that Grassy Knoll ink. This will make much quicker work. You'll notice that there's some little triangles in the stencil. Those are to help you line up the die, so make sure you ink through those as well. Once I'm done with the stems, I'm going to go ahead and reposition my stencil. But first, I'm going to wipe off any of this excess ink here at the top. When I go to blend my flowers, I don't want to be pulling my green into my flowers. So here we're going to line up this first layer of the stencil, and I am using the little corner mark that is etched onto the stencil there to help me line this up. And for this first flowers, I'm going to use passion fruit. I absolutely love this color. This might be my favorite, one of my favorite Pink Fresh colors. And I'm using the Pink Fresh blending brush here because I want to blend my flowers different colors. I don't want every flower on each layer to be the same. So I'm using a smaller brush here to get into the smaller areas. So after doing the passion fruit, I'm going to come in with the Berrylicious, and I'm just going to hit the bottom of this petal to make it just a little darker so I get a slight fade in my color. You can do this at this step, or you could just color these in solid and then add some shading after you cut them out. I'm going to do a little bit of both. So here I'm using the Wisteria ink from Pink Fresh, and I'm coloring these little bell-shaped flowers. And again, I'm concentrating my color heaviest at the bottom and then letting it I'm letting it fade out to the tips of the petals. Then I'm using a little bit of the, what is this? Apricot, I believe, for my yellow flowers. And then for the last flower, I believe that I used the passion fruit again. All right, so now we're going to do the next layer. And again, I'm going to line that up using that corner mark etched on the stencil. And here I've used Waterfall and a little Limoncello for my remaining flowers. And then I will move on to the third stencil, which will also have the flower centers in it. And for that, I used Espresso. Now, like I mentioned, this is a great option for those of you that don't keep a lot of colored cardstock on hand. Sometimes buying all of the different colors of cardstock, the cost can really add up. So if you're on a budget and you just don't like using colored cardstock, you prefer to ink blend your own colors, this is a great choice. It can be much more economical. You're only limited by the inks that you have on hand. So you could have an unlimited palette if you have, let's say, a lot of ink colors. Me personally, I do have colored cardstock, but a lot of the times with my die cuts, if you've followed me for a while, you know that I really, really love ink blending color onto cardstocks. It is my preferred method, but every now and then I do like that bold graphic look of colored cardstock. So like I said, this is just a great option for those of you who haven't invested in a lot of colored cardstock. Now you could easily skip this and just color your die cuts after you cut them out. However, sometimes the more intricate detailed dies, like say the stems here, they can be a little difficult to ink blend without shifting and moving and kind of messing up the delicate areas of the die. So again, this is just a great option. So here I have lined up my die. I'm using those triangles to help me line this up. And then I'm going to tape them in place so that they don't shift. You'll notice that I've also cut this in half so that I can run each die through individually. I noticed that sometimes when you try to run too many dies at once, sometimes your dies won't cut as cleanly. One of the dies just may be a little bit higher or lower than the other. I find that if I run each die through individually, especially when it's an intricate die, I get a much cleaner cut the first time through, and I don't have to worry about running it through multiple times. So one pass, and this is going to cut each of these super cleanly. All right, so you could definitely try it you could definitely try it with both dies at once. But if you're ever having issues with dies cutting cleanly or missing spots, if you've got several dies on your platform, I highly recommend just a tip, run them through separately. You probably won't have that issue. All right, so you'll see here that all of these are cut beautifully. They're going to pop right out. You'll also notice that the cut lines are just inside of the stencil lines. So it gives you a little bit of wiggle room if you're not lined up perfectly. This just gives you that little bit of wiggle room. You'll also notice that these dies have a little bit of detail cut into each of the flower layers, and you'll have that same exact detail cut into the stems and the leaves as well. This just gives them a little bit more character. And I'll hold one up here to the camera for you so that you can see that. You see those little cut lines in there? It just adds a little bit of extra detail that I absolutely love. And like I mentioned, the same detail is also cut into the stems and leaves. They look so much better, so much different once you die cut them. Look at how beautiful these are. And again, the ink blended is a little bit larger than the die. They cut just inside of your ink blending lines. All right, so with all of our pieces cut, it is now time to add that little bit of detail. Like I mentioned before, you could cut these all out of white and then just ink blend them without the stencil. The stencil is just good for getting that base color down super quickly. It goes much faster than coloring each of these individually. However, I do still like to go in and add a bit of detail, a bit of extra shading to my die cuts individually. It's just easier for me to do this part afterwards because I have a better idea of where I want to add that depth and that shadow. It's a little bit more difficult when you're just doing it through a stencil, especially when it's a multi-layer stencil. I find this a little bit easier to add those final little color touches. So I'm going to do that to just a few of the flowers. Here I've used a little bit of hydrangea just at the base over that wisteria that we used. It's a little bit deeper, and so I don't have to do as much ink blending to build up that wisteria color. I can just come in and hit it with a slightly darker shade. For the yellow flower there, I'm going to come in with a little bit of clementine. So we started off with the apricot as the base layer, and now I'm going to take some clementine and I'm going to blend that around the corners. But first I am going to wipe off my glass mat because I just used purple, and if I try to mix purple with that orange, if it picks up that purple off that mat, it's going to turn brown, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world since we're working with flowers, but I wanted a nice pretty orange, not brown. So hitting clementine down the sides here, I'm using just the side of that blending brush so that I can really target where I put the color. And then after I've done each of the sides, I will just go through and add a small bit of color to all of the outer petals. And for this card, I am keeping the shading very minimal. Sometimes I can go overboard, and I really get lost in those details, and I will spend hours shading a die cut. That's just my happy place. For here, we're just keeping it very basic. Once I've got all the color onto my flowers here, it's time to start assembling. These are super, super simple flowers. I think the most involved is this, what I'm going to call a poppy. I think that's what it's supposed to be. But you know, hey, I make up flowers all the time, so and it's poppy-ish. Color it any way you want. So I'm going to start with that one. This one has 3 layers. You've got the flower center and then that front petal. So it really gives it that little bowl shape, and it's absolutely adorable. I love this one. I've never been a fan of poppies. I don't I don't know. I've never been a huge fan of poppies, but I do like the stylistic, the illustrative poppies that are in this style of illustration. A real life poppy, I don't know. They just don't excite me very much. But I do really love that bold shaped flower with that big center. Super, super pretty. I'm going to put the rest of these together, and you'll see over there on the left that I am kind of starting to build my arrangement as I build my flowers. So I'm using this a little bit differently than intended. Each of the flowers in here has a coordinating stem. So some of them are single flowers and some of them are multi-flowered stems. So like that, those little bellflowers, 3 of those little bellflowers go on one stem. And then here, this poppy-like flower goes right here on this stem. So it would be a single stemmed flower. And all of the flowers in here are like that. You know, I guess this could be a buttercup too. If you were to do it yellow, I guess that could be a buttercup. I don't know what kind of flower it is, but like I said, I'm the queen of making up flowers. So then no judgment here. It's whatever type of flower you want. So like I said, I'm using this a little bit differently than intended. So I'm creating a bouquet and I'm going to cut these into pieces and use them however I want. That's the joy of crafting and creating. You can do whatever you want with these. These are just, they're guidelines. They'll give you an idea of how they are recommended to be used or how they were designed to be used, but there are no rules that say that you can't use them however you want. So I've cut my pieces, my leaves here, and I've just kind of filling in a space. Then I'm going to take this little bud here, which I believe goes with that larger cloud-shaped flower. I'm thinking maybe it's supposed to be cotton or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter what it is. It's supposed to go with that flower. However, I'm imagining that if that poppy-like flower were closed up, it would look similar to this. So I'm going to trim that off from the stem and I'm going to tuck it in here and make it look like a little bud of this poppy-type flower. I'm going to continue to cut up pieces and parts and create and build my arrangement until I get it pretty much how I think I'm going to use it in the end. It doesn't have to be exact at this point, but as long as I'm happy with the general shape and flow, then I'm going to move on to picking out my sentiment. So for that, we're going to use the Happy Vibes stamp set, and I just really love this font. I love that it's bold, and I think that it matches the style of these florals perfectly. I'm going to stamp that in black ink, and then I'm going to use the coordinating die cut to die cut them. I haven't decided exactly which one I want to use at this point. I will make that decision once I have them cut out. I'll pick out which one I think fits in the composition the best. So I'll go ahead and line these up and die cut those out. And then I've got my 2 sentiments here. So it's this point that I can go ahead and make my decision. And I pretty much knew right away, as soon as I had this cut out, and I laid it up against my arrangement here, I was like, yep, this is the one. So that's the sentiment we're going to go with. But first I want to take care of our background. It needs a little bit of something. So I'm going to grab the Essentials Tags die. I've used this several times before. I really, really love this die. Particularly, I love this little peekaboo cutout that is included with the tag. So you can use the tag with this little braided peekaboo cutout design, or you can use them separately. So here I'm using just that little detail, and I'm cutting it directly from a panel here. And this is just going to add a little bit of interest to the background, but also it kind of reminds me of a trellis. So it's going to work perfectly with my little cascading floral arrangement. It's going to look kind of like they're climbing a trellis. So here real quick, I wanted to show you that sometimes the ink from my dies, okay, so when I stamped and die cut the Enjoy the Little Things, the ink was a little bit wet, got on the plate of my die cutting machine. Then when I did this, it transferred to my clean white background. Sometimes, if you're quick, you can just use a white eraser and you can get rid of that. So I just wanted to show you guys. I could have cut that out, but I decided to keep it in because sometimes that happens. The ink will transfer from your cutting plate to your new piece of cardstock, and that can be quite annoying. But a lot of times a white eraser will take care of that, and if that doesn't, try a sanding eraser. So now that I've got my My arrangement here transferred to my little trellis. I'm got to decide where I want my sentiment. Right now this is all very left side heavy, so I know that my sentiment, I don't want it to be smack dab in the center. You could, but I wanted it a little offset to the right, and then that made me think that the right needed a little something something. It was just a little bare everywhere and very left side heavy. The black sentiment does help bring some weight to the lower right side, but I needed a little accent. So I grabbed some of the extra flowers and we're going to create a little flower cluster that's going to go down here on the right corner. So we've got the bulk of our arrangement there in the top left corner. We're going to put a smaller arrangement down in the lower right corner. And then the sentiment there is going to connect those two. All right, so once I've got something that I'm happy with, I'll go ahead and adhere those together, and then we can start adhering everything to our panel here. I'm going to tape that into place, and I'm going to use the press and seal trick. So I'm going to adhere the press and seal to my craft surface, press it onto my floral arrangement, pull that back, and then I'll just start adhering my arrangement. Now everything that's going to be on the very back, I'll adhere first, so I'll add liquid adhesive to that, flip my press and seal over, press it into place, give it a second to adhere, and then pull back my press and seal, and everything that's glued to the panel will stay in place. And now I can just add my next layer, which I'm going to use a little bit of thin foam adhesive for that. I always double check to make sure that the foam is going where it will clear the other elements. So I want this to lay flush. I'll add all of my foam and then just adhere that into place and then pull back that press and seal and everything is adhered. I'm going to leave that in place because I'm going to use it to also adhere the right side floral arrangement. I want to make sure that I have it exactly where I want it. So I'm going to shift that down, check, pick it up with my press and seal, add my adhesive, and then I'll just flip that back into place and everything is adhered. No need to arrange it twice because, you know, work smarter, not harder. I try to work smarter, not harder. Most of the time I end up working just harder, but sometimes I get it right. All right, so I'll give that a second to adhere, pull that away, and now all I have to do is add my sentiment. And I adhered that with a little bit of that thin foam as well so that it would lay flush with the top layer of flowers. I'm going to put a little bit of liquid adhesive on the back of this panel, and I'm adhering that to a light green cardstock. Again, that's just going to add a little bit of interest of a slightly different color peeking through those cutouts. And then to finish this off, we're going to add some sparkle with a Spectrum Noir pen. I'm just going to add it to all of my florals, but a little bit sparingly. So that is pretty much going to finish up this card. Let's go ahead and take a look at the finished card. So here you can see all of those gorgeous florals. Love the way this color palette turned out. You can see here when I tilt it in the light, all of that sparkle from the Spectrum Noir pen. I love the way the florals follow the flow of that makeshift arch we have going in the background. And I think that that bold black sentiment is perfect for bridging those two floral arrangements. I finished it off in the center of the blue flowers with a few rhinestones. And that finishes off this clean and simple card. I really hope that you guys enjoyed today's project. If you did, don't forget to give this a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any of the future videos. If you're looking for any of the featured supplies, you'll find those in the description box below. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.